The rain fell in sheets that night, like the sky was trying to scrub the earth clean. High in the hills, where the road carved through pine forests and steep ravines, the world had turned slick and shadowed. The mountain seemed to breathe in the storm, each gust of wind roaring through the trees like a warning. Cora Hale gripped the steering wheel of her aging cargo van with both hands. The heater was broken, her windshield wipers moved like they were underwater, and the headlights barely touched the dense fog ahead. Her delivery shift had ended an hour ago, but she was still winding her way home, back to a one-bedroom apartment above the town's only bookstore. Her clothes were damp from unloading bread boxes in the drizzle, and her stomach ached with hunger, but she told herself she was lucky. She always did. Then, around a bend near Ridge Point, she saw it. A flash. Sparks. A strange, stuttering glow. Her breath caught. Up ahead, half buried in the muddy ditch beside the guardrail, was a car, flipped on its side, its metal frame crushed like paper. One headlight blinked weakly, casting an eerie glow across the road. Smoke curled upward into the storm as if the earth itself was sighing. Without thinking, Cora slammed her brakes. The van skidded, fishtailing for a terrifying second before stopping just inches from the crash. She was already out of the driver's seat before the van stopped creaking. The rain hit her like a wall. Her boots slipped in the muck as she ran toward the wreck. "Hello?" she shouted. "Is anyone in there?" A groan. Faint. Weak. But real. Cora dropped to her knees beside the shattered passenger window. Through the spider-webbed glass, she saw him, an older man, maybe in his 70s, slumped sideways. Blood ran down from his temple, and his chest moved in shallow, irregular breaths. A seatbelt kept him tethered awkwardly to the crushed interior. "Hey," she said, voice trembling. "Stay with me, okay? You're going to be all right." His eyes fluttered. A whisper escaped his cracked lips. Don't let me die here." "You're not going to," she said fiercely, already tugging at the door. "I've got you." The door didn't budge. She tried again, gritting her teeth. Nothing. "Come on," she shouted, pounding on the metal with her fists. She scanned the ground, her heart pounding. A metal bar lay near the wreck, likely flung during the crash. She grabbed it, wedged it into the door frame, and heaved with everything she had. The door groaned, but stayed shut. Damn it. Without hesitating, she ran to the other side and smashed the driver's window with the rod. Glass rained down, slicing open her palm, but she didn't stop. She reached through, wincing as broken edges tore at her sleeves, and found the buckle. One click. Two. The seatbelt snapped free. And that's when she smelled it. Gasoline. No, no, no. She heard it too, a faint, deadly crackle beneath the hood. "Not now," she whispered. "Please not now." Fire licked out from the engine, glowing orange beneath the broken frame. With strength born of panic, she hooked her arms under the man's and pulled. He groaned, his weight like dead stone, but she didn't stop. "Come on, come on, come on," she panted, dragging him inch by inch through the rain-soaked gravel. They had just cleared 10 feet when the car exploded behind them. The blast rocked the mountainside. A surge of heat seared her back. Shards of metal and glass flew like shrapnel. Cora dropped to the ground, covering the man with her own body as the world lit up in a hellish bloom behind them. Then, silence, except the storm. Her ears rang. Her fingers trembled. But she was alive. And so was he. She sat up, gasping for breath, blood dripping from her hand. The man stirred weakly beneath her. "You saved me," he rasped. "You're not out of the woods yet," she said, hauling herself to her feet. "Stay awake, old man. We're not done." She stumbled back to her van and flung open the rear doors. A picnic blanket, meant for her solo lunches in the park, was still balled in the corner. She grabbed it, wrapped it around him, pressing it gently to his head wound. Then she helped him into the front seat, one painstaking step at a time. Her hands barely worked as she turned the ignition. "Please," she whispered. "Just one more mile." The engine coughed, once, twice, then roared to life. Cora drove like a woman possessed, down the winding path, tires slipping in the mud. She spoke to him the whole way, keeping him conscious. "You're doing great. Just a little more." Every red light was a miracle she didn't stop for. At last, the hospital lights broke through the curtain of rain. She swerved into the emergency bay and leaned on the horn. Nurses ran out. "Trauma incoming," Cora shouted. Man, late 70s, head injury, possible internal bleeding. He was in a crash. Staff swarmed the van, pulling him onto a stretcher, barking vitals and commands. As they moved, one nurse turned to her. Are you family? No, Cora said, wiping rain and blood from her face. Just someone who found him. Your name, please. For the report? She hesitated. Her chest rose and fell. Then she shook her head. It doesn't matter. Just saved him. And with that, she turned, walked back into the night, and disappeared. No one followed. No one knew her name. And she thought that would be the end. But it was only the beginning. 3 days later, in a gleaming tower of glass and steel overlooking the city skyline, Ryan Hale stood at the edge of his office window, unread emails glowing across his phone screen. Outside, the morning sun was hidden behind heavy gray clouds, as if mourning something the world hadn't yet realized it had almost lost. He hadn't slept much since the call. His grandfather, Walter Hale, once a war journalist turned publishing magnate, had survived a fiery car crash on a mountain road. He had been pulled from the wreckage by an anonymous stranger. No name. No camera footage. Only a second-hand description, a young woman, soaked to the bone, vanishing before anyone could thank her. Ryan replayed the voicemail again on speaker. She saved me, Ryan. Not just my life. She reminded me what life is supposed to feel like. Find her. For me. The words were raw, breathless. Not the Walter Hale the world knew, stern, unshakable, blunt as a hammer. Ryan had heard that voice in war rooms, courtroom negotiations, family arguments. But never like that. Never. Soft. Ryan turned from the window and grabbed his coat. He didn't know exactly where to start, but he knew he had to try. His first stop was the hospital. The staff told him what little they knew. The woman had brought Walter in after midnight, refused to give her name, and left before anyone could stop her. No surveillance footage? Ryan asked, eyebrows drawn tight. Storm knocked our exterior cams offline that week, the security manager explained apologetically. We do have a partial vehicle ID, though. Someone saw an old blue van. Dented left fender. No company logo. That was enough. Ryan returned to his office and looped in his personal assistant and tech team. They combed through traffic cameras from mountain passes leading toward the hospital. It took nearly 24 hours of grainy video and blurred stills, but eventually they found her. A glimpse, just 2 seconds, of a battered van turning into the hospital lot. Blue, aged, rust along the edges. The license plate obscured by mud, but barely legible. Got it, said his lead analyst. The van's registered to a bakery. Small shop. Edge of a town about 90 minutes south. Ryan didn't wait. He drove himself. No motorcade. No driver. Just him and the quiet weight of something that felt more personal than anything he'd ever done in his high-powered life. The bakery stood on the corner of a quiet street, its windows fogged from warmth and oven steam. The sign read, Hill and Hearth, Artisan Breads and Pastries. Ivy curled around the doorframe. A bell chimed softly as Ryan stepped inside. The smell hit him like memory, cinnamon, fresh dough, something faintly lemony. It reminded him of Sunday mornings in his grandfather's old kitchen, before empire building replaced slow breakfasts. Behind the counter stood a woman. She wore a pale apron dusted with flour, her dark hair tied back in a loose braid. She was rolling a batch of croissant dough, her sleeves pushed past her elbows. Calm. Focused. The same face from the blurry dash cam still. Ryan's breath caught. Hi, she said, looking up. Welcome. What can I get for you? He stepped closer. I'm actually looking for someone. Her hands paused. Oh? A woman, he said carefully, watching her. She drove an elderly man to the hospital a few nights ago. Pulled him out of a crash. Van was blue. Old. Dented. Her expression shifted, just barely. A flicker of awareness in her eyes. I think. It was you. She looked down, kneading the dough again slowly. I didn't do it for thanks. I'm not here to thank you, Ryan replied. I'm here because my grandfather, the man you saved, hasn't stopped talking about you since. He doesn't even know your name. He just calls you the girl who saved my soul. That made her pause. She looked at him then, really looked. He's okay? He's recovering, Ryan said. He keeps saying the same thing. That you didn't ask who he was. You didn't care about what he had. You just saved him. She exhaled. I didn't know his name. I didn't even think twice. I saw a man who needed help, and I couldn't drive past. Ryan nodded. That's exactly what he remembers. Every detail. Every second. And I know he'd like to see you. Not to make it a spectacle. Just to thank you. As a man. As someone who almost didn't get another sunrise. Mia, though she hadn't yet said her name, looked down again. Her voice was quiet. "People like him. They don't usually notice people like me." Ryan's brow furrowed. "People like you?" She gave a small shrug. "People who live quietly. Deliver bread. Work long shifts. Disappear into sidewalks." "I noticed," Ryan said. "So did he." For a moment, she didn't speak. Then she whispered, "I'm Cora. Cora Hale." Ryan's heart skipped a beat. Not because of her name, but because of the way she said it. Like she never expected anyone to remember it. Later that evening, Ryan found himself back outside the bakery. No cameras. No entourage. Just him. Cora was locking up the delivery van, her braid now wet from the misting rain. She looked at him with guarded curiosity. "Do you want something?" she asked. He hesitated, then offered, "Dinner?" She blinked. "Why?" "Because I want to know the person who saved the man who raised me." She narrowed her eyes slightly. "No interviews. No thank you speeches. Just soup and grilled cheese," he said, smiling. She stared at him a second longer. Then nodded once. "Okay." They sat in a small diner. No chandeliers. No linen napkins. Just cracked red booths and warm apple pie on the counter. She told him about growing up in group homes. Delivering bread since she was 16. How the mountain road didn't scare her, but losing someone she couldn't help did. He listened. Not as a CEO. Not as the heir to a fortune. Just as a man. And in her quiet voice, he heard something he hadn't heard in years. Truth. Cora didn't believe in fairy tales. Not because they were impossible, but because they were built for other people, people with flawless pasts and silk-lined futures. She'd grown up learning that good deeds didn't come with parades, and that kindness, more often than not, echoed into silence. And yet, after that first quiet dinner with Ryan Hale, something began to shift. Not in a storybook way, not with fireworks or serenades, but in smaller, quieter ripples. He started showing up. Once a week at first. Then twice. Then nearly every day. Sometimes he'd buy a croissant and sit in the far corner of the bakery, tapping away at his laptop. Other times he'd offer to help carry boxes to the van, always in rolled-up sleeves and jeans that didn't match his CEO reputation. Cora expected him to get bored, to lose interest once the mystery wore off. But he didn't. He stayed. He asked about her delivery routes, her favorite bread to bake, even how long it took her to get flour out from under her fingernails. And he listened, really listened, with a kind of gentle presence that made her nervous at first. Because he wasn't like the others. He didn't look at her like a project or a charity case. He looked at her like she was something rare. One Tuesday afternoon, she caught him crouched by the bakery van's front tire, brow furrowed. "This thing's nearly bald," he said. "I know," she replied, wiping her hands on her apron. "Trying to make it last until next month." The next day, the tire was replaced. He didn't make a show of it. No receipt waved. No speech about safety. Just a quiet note taped to the dashboard: "You deserve a road that doesn't fight back." Cora stared at the note for a long time. That evening, she invited him to ride along on her last delivery. The sun was setting as they wound down the narrow lanes of her final stop, a tiny cottage on the edge of town where an elderly man lived alone. She handed over a loaf of rye and a carton of soup, exchanged a few words in Spanish, and returned to the van. Ryan had watched the whole thing. "You do this for everyone?" he asked. "No," she said, climbing back in. "Only the ones who remind me of who I could have become if no one had helped me." They sat in silence for a moment. Then she added, "Most people see delivery work as just transactions. Bread for money. But it's not that. It's connection. It's showing up." Ryan glanced sideways. "You're not just showing up, Cora. You're carrying people." Her hands tightened on the wheel. "That's the thing, though," she said. "When you carry enough weight, you forget what it feels like to be light." He didn't answer. Just looked at her with something quiet and steady. It didn't take long for the rest of the world to notice. One blurry photo. A single article. Cora stepping out of the bakery. Ryan behind her, holding the door. That was all it took. By the next morning, her life had changed. CEO's mysterious bakery girl, from flour to fortune? Hero or hoax? The woman behind the car crash miracle. Sleeping her way to the top, or saving lives? The headlines were vicious. Her phone buzzed non-stop. Camera crews appeared outside the bakery. Customers turned curious, some snapping photos instead of ordering pastries. Strangers dug into her past, her foster care records, an old blog she'd forgotten even existed. The kindness she'd once poured into the world was being twisted into suspicion. Even the accident, The night she'd saved Walter Hale was now being questioned. One article implied she hadn't pulled him from the wreck at all, that emergency crews had arrived first and she'd exaggerated her involvement. Another headline asked, would she have stopped if the man weren't wealthy? She stopped reading after that. But the damage had already landed. The bakery owner, kind as she was, sat her down one morning and gently asked if maybe she needed to take some time. The customers were getting uncomfortable. Sales had dipped. So Cora packed her bag. She wrote a note. Simple. There. Thank you for everything. Please tell Ryan I'm sorry. Then she bought a one-way ticket to a town 3 states away. She didn't tell anyone where she was going. She didn't say goodbye. She simply vanished. Just like she had after the crash. But she never made it onto the bus. Because that morning, as she sat at a diner with her suitcase by her side and coffee going cold in front of her, the world shifted again. Ryan Hale stood on a stage, microphones in front of him, cameras pointed like weapons. But he wasn't in a boardroom or a tech convention. He was at a press conference. Alone. No PR team. No scripted statement. Just truth. I've stayed quiet long enough, he said. And I won't let silence protect cruelty anymore. He looked into the lens like he was staring straight at her. Her name is Cora Hale, he said. She saved my grandfather's life when no one else would. She carried him out of a burning car and drove him down a mountain in a storm. She didn't ask for anything. No fame. No reward. He paused. And now, because I happen to care about her, you're treating her like she's a criminal. Cora's heart stuttered. She doesn't need to belong in my world, Ryan continued. Because I choose to live in hers. Gasps rippled through the crowd. But Ryan didn't flinch. She's not a social climber. She's the most grounded, selfless person I've ever met. And I'm proud to love her. The room erupted. And somewhere, in a diner booth smelling of burnt bacon and broken dreams, Cora let herself cry for the first time in days. Not because she was hurt. But because she was seen. The air outside the bakery smelled like rain and rosemary the day Walter Hale came to town. He didn't arrive in a limousine, nor did he bring reporters or press. Instead, he stepped out of a dusty sedan, leaning heavily on a cane with a slow, measured grace. His gait had changed since the accident, slower, more deliberate, but his eyes were still sharp, alive with something his staff hadn't seen in years. Hope. Cora was in the back, glazing morning buns when the bell chimed and her name was called softly, almost like a memory. Cora? There's someone here to see you. She wiped her hands instinctively, not knowing what to expect. When she stepped through the swinging door and saw the man waiting near the counter, her breath caught. Walter. He stood quietly, hat in hand, the same face she had once seen stained with blood and terror beneath broken glass and smoke. Now it was washed, softened by age and recovery, but still unmistakable. Cora froze. You, she stammered. Walter lifted his gaze and offered a trembling smile. I told my grandson, he said, that I needed to look into the eyes of the woman who gave me another sunrise. Cora's hands fumbled with her apron. I didn't think you'd remember me. He took a step closer, slow but certain. I remember everything. The rain. The cold. Your voice telling me to hang on. He paused, eyes glinting with something between tears and pride. I remember being pulled out of fire by someone who never asked for a thing. Cora's throat tightened. Walter reached for her hand across the counter. She hesitated, then placed hers in his, weathered fingers meeting scarred palms. You saved my life, he said. But more than that, you reminded me that the world still holds people who act without agenda. You reminded me what it means to be human. Tears burned in her eyes. I didn't think anyone would care, she whispered. I thought you'd forget. I couldn't if I tried, he said gently. And trust me, I've tried to forget a lot of things in my long life. But not this. Never this. Behind them, staff had gone silent. Even customers at the small tables had paused their conversations, watching the moment unfold with reverence. Walter reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small, leather-bound book. Inside was a single note, scrawled in his handwriting. Find her. Thank her. And if she lets you, stay. Cora stared at it. I wrote that the day I woke up, he said. Before I even called Ryan. I didn't know your name then. But I knew your soul. She didn't speak. Couldn't. Then came Ryan. He entered quietly, nodding at his grandfather before his eyes locked with Cora's. Something unspoken passed between them. Relief. Recognition. And something gentler, like peace, finally finding its place. Walter smiled, sensing the shift. Well, he said, stepping back with that familiar mischievous glance. I suppose this is where I stop interrupting history in the making." He gave her hand one final squeeze, then turned and walked toward the door, nodding once to his grandson before leaving them alone in the golden morning light. The days after felt like something sacred. Cora didn't disappear this time. She stayed. She showed up. Not just for the bakery, but for herself. Ryan, too, began arriving earlier, often helping with deliveries, offering jokes while balancing pastry boxes, and occasionally burning his tongue on coffee just to make her laugh. And the laughter came more freely now. One afternoon, as they walked the edge of the old town park, Cora paused by a bench and looked up at the sky, which had broken open in streaks of soft blue and gold. "I've never stayed anywhere this long," she murmured. Ryan tilted his head. "Why not?" "Because no one ever gave me a reason to," she said. "Until now." They sat side by side, elbows brushing, neither speaking. The wind rustled through the trees above, and for a long moment, the silence said everything. In the weeks that followed, Ryan helped launch a community initiative in Walter's name, the Hale Beacon Project, providing emergency supplies, counseling, and first aid training to small towns along isolated roads. Cora, reluctant at first, was coaxed into co-leading the program. "You've done it already," Ryan told her. "You saved a life in the dark. Now help others find the light." She agreed, quietly, cautiously, but with fire in her bones. They hosted their first event outside the bakery, where people gathered under string lights and shared stories of survival and kindness. Cora stood on stage, shaking slightly, but when she spoke, her voice was clear. "I don't know how to be important," she said, "but I do know how to show up." Applause thundered. And in that crowd, she saw something she had never seen reflected back at her before. Belonging. One night, as the town tucked into sleep and the last lamplight flickered out on Main Street, Ryan and Cora sat on the bakery rooftop, legs swinging over the edge. She leaned against him, head on his shoulder. "I used to think I'd always be running," she said. "From what?" "Being forgotten. Being invisible. Being too much and never enough at the same time." Ryan turned toward her, gently brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. "You were never invisible," he said. "Just waiting for the right eyes to see you." Cora looked up, tears threatening again. "You saw me. I'll never stop." And he kissed her. Not as a rescue. Not as a reward. But as a promise. The garden behind Walter Hale's country home was never meant for grand ceremonies. It was just a patch of land with stubborn rose bushes and a pear tree that bloomed only when it pleased. But that day, as soft string lights swayed between wooden posts and folding chairs lined a cobbled stone path, it became something more, something sacred. Cora stood at the edge of the garden in a simple ivory dress that skimmed the grass. No veil. No diamonds. Just a crown of wild flowers tucked into her loose braid and a smile that trembled with wonder. The same hands that once pulled a stranger from fire now held a bouquet stitched with meaning, rosemary for remembrance, sage for strength, and white lilac for beginnings. She didn't feel like a bride from a magazine. She didn't need to. Because every person seated on those borrowed chairs had seen her. Not in headlines, not filtered through rumors or wealth, but in truth. In the flower dust on her apron. In the way she held space for silence and people alike. In the way she had turned saving a life into choosing a future. Ryan stood beneath the handmade wooden arch, its frame wrapped in linen and fresh ivy. He wore no tie, just a crisp shirt with sleeves rolled up, a nod to the man he had become, less glass tower, more grounded soil. When Cora stepped forward, the small crowd rose, not in pomp but in quiet awe. Walter sat front row, his cane resting beside him, his hands clasped tight. Tears shimmered in his eyes as he watched the woman who had once dragged him from wreckage now walk toward the greatest rebuild of all. Next to him sat Elsie. She was 7 now, all freckled cheeks and missing teeth, her flower crown slipping sideways as she clutched a handmade sign that read, "This is what love looks like." She'd made it herself the night before, scribbled in glitter glue and sincerity. Cora reached the arch and stood before Ryan, breath catching as she looked up at him. The officiant cleared his throat, but before he could speak, Ryan gently lifted a hand. "I asked to go first," he said with a nervous smile. Cora nodded, heart pounding. Ryan took a breath, voice soft but sure. "I used to think love had to fit a mold. That it came dressed in expectation, in symmetry, in what the world applauds. But then I met you. And you didn't try to impress or perform. You just were. Fierce. Quiet. Real." He paused, eyes shining. "You pulled my grandfather out of a burning car. But you pulled me out of something too. Out of numbness. Out of a life filled with rooms and power but no peace. You reminded me that presence matters more than perfection." Cora's eyes brimmed. Ryan gently reached out, brushing a tear from her cheek. "I vow to never unsee you," he whispered. "To never let the noise of the world drown the quiet truths we've built together. You're not just my love, Cora. You're my compass." He stepped back, and the officiant turned to her. Cora stared at her trembling hands, then slowly exhaled. "I never thought I'd be chosen," she began, voice breaking. "Not in this way. Not for anything lasting. I used to believe kindness was something you gave and let go of. That it vanished into the world without return." She looked at him now, full of certainty. "But you showed me it can echo. That it comes back in ways we can't predict. That sometimes it builds." A pause. "You've held every part of me, messy, scared, hopeful, and never once asked me to be more than who I already am. I promised to stand beside you, not because I was saved, but because I chose to stay. With you. For us." There were no chandeliers or violins. Just the breeze, the rustle of leaves, and a collective breath held as the officiant smiled. "By the power of your choice," he said warmly, "I pronounce you husband and wife." Their kiss was soft, reverent. Not a performance. A seal. As they turned, Elsie sprinted toward them, arms open wide. "Mama! Daddy!" Cora knelt as the girl leapt into her arms. Ryan wrapped them both in his embrace. And for the first time, they were not three people trying to find their place. They were the place. The reception was a patchwork of joy. Wooden tables were draped in mismatched cloth. Dishes came potluck style, spiced lentils from Mrs. Vega, who lived 2 doors down, fresh bread from Hill and Hearth, now cored by Cora and her best friend, pies from a local farm, and lemonade poured from chipped pitchers by kids in flower crowns. No one wore tuxedos. No one cared. Ryan stood near the garden's edge as dusk settled, watching Cora twirl with Elsie beneath the soft light of lanterns. Her laugh echoed into the air like a promise. Walter joined him quietly, sipping iced tea. "She doesn't know it," Walter said, "but she's the best decision either of us ever made." Ryan smiled. "I think she does. She just doesn't say it." "That's the kind that lasts," Walter murmured. Months passed. Seasons changed. Cora and Ryan turned the old storage room behind the bakery into an office for the Beacon Project, which now stretched across 3 states. They hired counselors, EMTs, built roadside safety boxes and funded mobile clinics in remote areas. But even as their reach grew, their life stayed small, intentionally so. Home was a 2-bedroom house with creaky floors and too many plants. Dinner was often leftovers or burnt toast, and their fridge always had at least one half-finished drawing from Elsie taped to it. Every Sunday, they picnicked in the park, Cora's famous sandwiches, Ryan's terrible attempts at lemonade, and Elsie's unfiltered commentary on both. Their love wasn't loud. It was built in the quiet. In the brushing of flour from shoulders. In the way Ryan waited for her to unlock the bakery door even when he had the key. In how Cora left notes in his coat pockets with nothing but "Thank you for choosing me." One night, as they lay in bed with the window open and the crickets singing, Cora turned to him. "Did you ever imagine this?" she asked. Ryan stared at the ceiling, hand resting on hers. "Only in pieces," he whispered. "But never like this. Never all together." She smiled and leaned in, pressing her forehead to his. "From fire," she said softly, "to family." He kissed her gently. "To everything we'll build next."